Hey, welcome to Lead Up Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Harbour. This is episode 476. Man, we're running up on that 500th episode. We'll get there before the end of the year. And I'm really excited that you have joined me today to talk about 4 non-negotiables that prevent most leadership failures. I know if you're listening, you're a leader and you want to prevent failure. None of us want to fail, right? We don't even want to set others up to fail. So I'm going to share 4 non-negotiables with you today that if you'll implement in your leadership, it'll move you up the ranks toward elite leadership, and you'll experience less failure in your life and your leadership and your team. So let's get started. I want to start with a truth that's going to be a little uncomfortable for you as a leader. Most performance problems don't start with performance. They start with management shortcuts. They start months or years before the leader even says, why isn't my team delivering? How many times have you done that? Like, why isn't my team delivering? And we can look back. I often relate this to our health issues. One day we wake up and we're overweight and we're out of shape. But see, that didn't happen overnight. It happened years before when we made the decision to not follow good habits and move ourselves in a more healthy direction. Look, leadership isn't about reacting when things go wrong. It's about setting conditions so fewer things go wrong in the first place. Today's episode is what I call the 4 non-negotiables that prevent most leadership failures. These aren't soft skills. They aren't nice to haves, and they aren't optional if you want sustainable performance and trust and momentum. I'm going to share them with you here, and then we're going to break down each one of these 4 non-negotiables as I continue to share with you in this episode. Here they are. Select with intent. Look, I wrote a book called Quit Losing Talent. One of the strategies is attraction. We talk about this as selection with intent. If you don't have a copy of my book, Quit Losing Talent, go to Amazon, look me up, get the expanded edition. That's the edition you want. I've written that book twice, one a small version, but one the expanded edition. I talk deeply about this. I'm going to share some things with you today, but I talk deeply about this in that strategy, the attraction strategy. The second non-negotiable is create clarity at the edge. Lead through rhythm, not rescue. That's the third. And then the fourth is develop through truth. So we're going to take a deeper look at each one of these over the next 20 minutes or so in this podcast. Here's the kicker. 95% of management problems start from skipping these fundamentals. 95%. Look, if you can get 95% better, would you do that? I hope you said yes to that question. That was a test. Look, if you just get better at these, a little bit better at these. I'm a big fan of James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, where he writes about the 1% rule. If we get 1% better each day, we're going to experience a 37% return by the end of the year. What if you could just get a little bit better in each one of those fundamentals I just went through? Skip them early, though, and you're going to pay later at a cost that's easily 10 times higher in turnover, disengagement, underperformance. When organizations bring us in, meaning Harbour Resources, when they bring us in to help, it's usually because they have turnover issues, employee engagement issues, retention issues, morale issues, burnout issues, and they're experienced that 10x cost of missing fundamentals. And so they bring us in to help recreate a leadership operating system, really, to teach their leaders and their managers these leadership fundamentals, not soft skills, but fundamentals that improve performance, turnaround, all those things by up to 95%. Let's dive deep into these 4 fundamentals. The first one, as I said, is select with intent. Most leaders don't have a performance problem. What they have is a selection problem. They have a right person on the right seat on the right bus problem. According to the U.S. Department of Labor, these aren't my statistics, a bad hire cost an organization 30% of the employee's first year earnings at a minimum. Look, I often say 1 to 2 times your annual salary. Let's just say you've got somebody at $100,000 salary, it's going to cost you 30% of that, at least, if they're a bad hire, at least that. Costing you their salary, really, if they're not performing at the level that you need them to perform. And then there's all the re-recruitment and morale issues that you have to put up with. Other studies suggest that it's 2 to 3 times salary when you factor in that lost productivity and that team drag and the rehiring costs that come into that, as I mentioned. But under pressure, leaders rush hiring decisions. Especially in the healthcare space, we got into this practice of hiring warm bodies because we needed somebody so bad. And look, that's not going to get any easier over the next 10, 15 years because of the shortage in workforce that we're experiencing and will experience even more. So this hiring with intent is even more important for you right now. But many leaders hire because we need somebody now. They were good enough. Like, we settle for good enough and not great, not good fits. We'll coach them up later. Well, how's that working for you? How's that working for you? I mean, trying to change somebody, you know how hard that is? And look, that's my business, is really trying to change behavior when it comes to leadership. That's really hard to do. It's hard to change yourself, much less someone else. What you need to understand is that's not leadership. That's gambling. Elite leaders invest time up front so they don't bleed time later. Hiring with precision means this: looking for values alignment. Read in my book, Quit Losing Talent, Target Check Your Values. It's the first chapter in the book for a reason. But we want to look for values alignment, not just skill set, not capability. Use real work examples, not hypothetical interviews. Personally check references and asking uncomfortable questions, and never lowering the bar because of a timeline. Look, I read something interesting recently about an interview process, and this candidate mentioned to an HR person, this is the 7th interview I've had recently, and every interviewer has asked me what my strengths or my weaknesses are, but they've never asked me about how I'll do the job. And see, that's a huge failure in leadership. It's a huge failure in our interview process. We help companies build what we call elite interview processes so that you can dig deeper into these candidates that you're interviewing and make sure they're a right who fit, not a skill set fit. Skills, I assume you wouldn't be interviewing them if they didn't have the skills to do the job. They've made it that far. The most important is, who are they? Because who determines what? Who we are as an individual determines how we do something, what we do, how we show up. Let's think about yourself. Who you are determines how you lead, how you show up. And it's true for everybody that you're interviewing. So when you drop standards at the door, problems walk in with the person. Theodore Roosevelt said this: the best executive is the one who has the sense enough to pick enough good people to do what he wants to do, and self-restraint, and enough self-restraint to keep from meddling while they do it. Look, if you're constantly managing around people instead of managing through them, you need to go back to the hiring process. That's where it all began. That's where the leak started. Hiring isn't about filling seats. It's about protecting the standard. Leaders who struggle, I'm going to come back to that in just a minute, protecting the standard. Leaders who struggle with performance usually didn't make a bad leadership decision later. They made a compromise selection decision early. Selecting with intent means designing hiring as a leadership act, not an HR task. You're the leader. You're going to be responsible for the people that work on your team. It's your responsibility as a leader to make sure we get that right. It's not HR's responsibility. Screening for values and judgment and learning velocity. Are they coachable? We don't want to just look at their experience. We want to stress test candidates with real work pressure and real expectations during that interview. I'd rather have them say no during the interview than say yes, only to find out they weren't a really good fit for us. And then refusing to let urgency dilute standards. Look, you continue to talk with your team. Let them know you're interviewing, but don't let the urgency and this feeling that I got to take the pressure off of my team So I just need to hire somebody that's going to create more challenges, not only with the new person you hire that's not a fit, but also your current team when they realize that you've made a mistake. Here's the truth. You don't build culture after people arrive. You import it with every hiring decision. I read recently, someone commented on a post I had made on LinkedIn about this very thing, about hiring. And this guy made a comment about every time we hire somebody, it changes our culture. And I responded back, well, if that's the truth, if it's true, then we're hiring the wrong people. Hiring people should not change our culture unless we're hiring them to change our culture. Now, if you're hiring people to change your culture, and usually that's done at the leadership level. But if we're hiring staff people and they change our culture, we're making poor decisions in the hiring process. We should be hiring people that fit our culture, that fit our values, and our culture shouldn't leak because we're hiring good people. They should bleed through that new individual. Every hiring shortcut becomes a leadership burden later. Remember that. Let's look at the second fundamental I want to talk about. Create clarity at the edge. One of the most expensive leadership mistakes is unspoken expectations. We have ideas, we have expectations in our head, but we haven't shared them clearly. According to Gallup, 50%, only 50% of employees agree that they know exactly what's expected of them at work. That means half your workforce is guessing. And people don't fail expectations, they fail clarity. Alignment isn't just about role description. It's about defining what success looks like, how success is achieved, what good actually means in this role, on this team, right now. See, elite leaders do three things exceptionally well. They document expectations, they define the what and the how, and they revisit expectations as the business evolves. Let me talk about that documenting expectations. So many organizations I've worked with in the hiring process, and especially after the hire, but that onboarding process, there's no documented expectations. They call onboarding, hey, I want to have you hang out with this person and watch this person, and we hope they get it. Every organization we work with, look, we're helping install a leadership operating system. And we challenge every department manager, every leader, every supervisor to have a written, documented 90-day, day by day, week by week, month by month onboarding plan. So we can, when we make those new hires, we can lead them in that direction. This is your expectations, and this is how we're going to lead you. And oh, by the way, that becomes a leadership tool for you after you hire somebody and they've been with you a while. When they make a mistake, we just bring them back to those expectations that we've set. Clarity isn't a one-time event. It's a leadership habit. Misalignment creates frustration, micromanagement, missed results, and I thought you meant conversations. If you don't define success, people will define it themselves. And you probably, as a leader, if I know you well, and I've worked with thousands of leaders, you probably won't like their definition of success. It's a huge struggle that we have today as leaders, is really creating that clear expectation. And we're frustrated and we're blaming the generations behind us. These new people, these young people don't want to work. Yes, they do. What they want is clarity. They want to know how to succeed. We don't leave them guessing. And maybe you grew up just guessing and figuring it out and you were successful. But I'm challenging you as a leader to change the way you lead. Most conflict isn't caused by poor performance. It's caused by unclear edges, unclear expectations, lack of clarity. High-performing teams know exactly what success looks like, how decisions get made, where autonomy ends and accountability begins. For you as a leader, creating clarity means defining success in observable terms, naming the unspoken assumptions that quietly derail trust, separating outcomes from methods, and being explicit about both, and updating expectations as the environment changes. Here's the truth. People don't resist accountability. They resist ambiguity disguised as leadership. If expectations aren't explicit, frustrations become inevitable. And I know if you're like most leaders I work with, you're tired of these frustrations. But it's really about you. It's about your leadership habits, about your leadership behavior, about your leadership direction. It's about the people you hire, how you hold them accountable, what conversations you have with them. So let's jump to the third non-negotiable, leading through rhythm, not rescue. Look, your job as a leader is not to rescue people. Great leaders don't show up when things break. They show up before things break. Leadership rhythm creates safety, creates momentum, and trust before it is ever tested. So what does that mean for you as a leader? One-on-ones, your one-on-ones with your team, they're not optional. They're a must-have. I recommend every employee that as a leader gets a one-on-one at least once a month. Now you may say, well, I don't have time to do it that long. Well, if you're frustrated, maybe you need to make time. Maybe you need to find time. See, one-on-ones are not optional. They're not a perk. They're not expendable when things get busy. They are the infrastructure of your leadership. They're foundational for you to move people in the direction you need them to go. Harvard Business Review shows that employees who meet weekly with their manager are more engaged, more productive, more likely to stay. And yet the first thing many leaders cancel when pressure hits is the one meeting designed to prevent pressure in the first place. Effective one-on-ones focus on three things. Impact. Is your work making a difference? This is a great question. Is your work making a difference? Development. How are you growing? This is where you talk about attitude, where you talk about the way they show up, you talk about their performance. And then the third thing is support. What obstacles can I remove? How can you support them as a leader? Is there anything that would make them not come back? Where do you need to step in? Now, you can't solve all their problems as a leader, but what you can do is listen and learn and find out if there is pressure that you need to relieve from those that you're leading. It's better to find that out in a one-on-one than to find it out the day they come in and resign and say they've had enough of this place. See, these meetings build trust before it's needed. They prevent surprises. They prevent disengagement. They prevent quiet quitting. You know what that is, right? Quiet quitting. They show up to work, but they're just not there. They do just enough to not get fired. And these one-on-ones prevent emotional withdrawal. John Maxwell says this: people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Your number one job as a leader is to show value, show people that they matter, to care about your people. It's the number one driver of retention. If your team only hears from you when something's wrong, leadership is already broken down. You've already lost the team. Leading through rhythm means this: protecting one-on-ones as a non-negotiable leadership infrastructure. Using consistent touch points to surface friction early. Focusing on impact, growth, and obstacles, not status updates. And in coaching in real time instead of rescuing in crisis. Here's the truth for you as a leader: consistency builds trust, inconsistency creates noise. Let's go back to that 1% rule. Consistency creates trust. If you had regular one-on-ones, would your trust level rise with your employees over time? Absolutely, it would. But you got to be consistent with it. Leadership doesn't fail in crisis. It fails in the gaps between conversations. Let's look at the fourth and final non-negotiable I want you to learn today. I hope you've taken notes. Hope you come back and listen to this episode. Hope you share it with other leaders on your team, because this is important stuff. These are things that I work with leaders every day in helping resolve. But the fourth non-negotiable is this: develop through truth. Feedback's not about correction. It's about capacity expansion. It's really about developing people to their full potential. I feel like that's my responsibility as a leader. It's what leaders have done for me in the past. They help me become better and better and better. It's not about correcting them. It's about developing them, helping them become a better person and a better employee. Feedback is not correction. Feedback is fuel. Remember that. It gives them fuel, and most people want it. Gallup research shows that employees who receive regular feedback are 3.6 times more likely to be engaged. We want them engaged, but we have to give them regular feedback. Feedback is their friend. It's your friend. It's all of our responsibility to make sure that we're giving that feedback. Teams with high psychological safety outperform their peers by up to 27%. So you can drive this as a leader. This is critical for you as a leader to drive this engagement and performance. So what do leaders do? They give feedback quickly. They give feedback specifically. They give feedback with balance. And they give feedback in both directions, meaning you listen for feedback as well, so you can respond to that. All right. Matter of fact, that's a tactic in my book, Quit Losing Talent. Respond to feedback. When you get it, respond to it, even if you don't like it. So elite leaders in doing this and in developing through truth, you help high performers see their blind spots. Like your high performers need feedback as well. They want it more than anybody because high performers are often harder on themselves than anybody else, and they want to know how they're doing, and they want to know how they can get better. This feedback also, self-critics can see their win. I just kind of mentioned that in your high performers. We want to give them feedback of what they are doing well because they're being so hard on themselves, which lowers their performance level, by the way. And then it also helps coachable employees stay coachable. When we consistently give feedback, not just when we see problems, but all the time, it helps people remain open to coaching. And that's an important asset for you as a leader. Look, feedback isn't about being nice. It's about being useful as a leader, helping people. Your job, yes, as a department leader is to move that department forward, but you're only as good as the people that you have on your team. Let me ask you right now, could you lead your department right now if all your employees left? No. You don't have anybody to lead. And then you're going to do all the work yourself. So your job is to develop people. These are non-negotiables, to develop people so they can perform without barriers and help you look good as a leader. Then Kim Blanchard said, feedback is the breakfast of champions. If people are surprised by their performance review, leadership failed long before the review ever happened. You should have 11 performance reviews before the annual review ever happens. Here's what high-performing cultures normalize. They normalize truth early, often, and safely. Truth is not beating somebody up. It's encouraging them and sharing where they're falling short, sharing what they're doing well, giving feedback close to the moment, not after the damage, balancing reinforcement with challenge, helping high performers see their blind spots, and helping self-critics see their wins, and in creating the psychological safety for two-way accountability. Here's the truth, leaders. People don't fear feedback. What they fear is being blindsided. When you get good at this, growth accelerates when truth is delivered with care and consistency. So let me leave you with this. Your team is in a race, whether you acknowledge it or not. And races aren't won with last-minute heroics. They're won with the strong starts, the clean handoffs, and disciplined execution. Just think about any sports team, football, baseball, basketball, any of those sports teams. They don't win when they get to the game. The scoreboard reflects who wins, but they win in the preparation and the practice and the coaching that happens before they get there. How will they handle those tough moments? Here's the 4 non-negotiables that I want to leave you with. Select with intent, create clarity at the edge, lead through rhythm, not rescue, and develop through truth. If you ignore these, you'll spend the next year or years fixing problems that never needed to exist. Invest up front or you pay 10x the price later. And leadership always collects the bill. Hey, thanks for tuning in to the Lead Up Podcast. I hope this has been valuable for you. Come back and listen. Grab a few of your peer leaders. Listen together. Take notes. How can you challenge each other Use this as a lunch and learn to develop and grow together. And most of all, keep coming back and listening to the Lead Up podcast, to our great interviews that we're having this year, as well as the lessons on leadership that I'm going to continue to deliver to you. We'll see you on the next episode of the Lead Up podcast.